Greetings, everybody, and welcome to New Plaza's series of classic film talkbacks. I'm Norma Levy, president of New Plaza. We're a nonprofit showing independent and foreign films and providing educational programs on classic cinema. Today's film is a spectacular 1948 dance film created by British director Michael Powell and Hungarian screenwriter Emmerich Pressburger. It's called, as Saul mentioned, The Red Shoes. I'm pleased to announce that this wonderful film is being sponsored by our loyal supporter of New Plaza, Janice Bogard, who was born in London, lives in New York, and loves the dance. Together, Janice and our curator, Gary Palmucci, decided on this film today. In the talkback, Gary will be joined by his good friend, the noted film historian, Max Alvarez. So I hope you enjoy the talkback, and it's my great pleasure to turn this over to Gary.
Well, thank you, Norma. Welcome back, everyone. As I was saying, as many times in many different formats as I've seen The Red Shoes over the decades, I found this most recent viewing to be as exhilarating as any of them. This is still a film whose multi-level craft and passions feel utterly contemporary, the culmination of an extraordinary run of first-rate films in the 1940s by the writing, producing, directing team of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, which many of you may have learned more about from Max's epic presentation 2 weeks ago. But before we get further into that, Max has unearthed a beautiful original Technicolor trailer of The Red Shoes, which I think is head and shoulders over most of the trailers that he and I are often showing you at this point in the program. So Max, let's have a look at this and then dissect it a bit.
On its way, and this is the original trailer that people would have seen in the cinemas.
The Red Shoes, daringly original musical that captures all the glamour of the south of France in exquisite Technicolor, blending compelling beauty and high drama with a love story of sheer enchantment, assembling a cast of international stars to endow an enthralling film with their rich vitality, and making the outstanding debut of this or any other year, a lovely red-headed girl graced with all the talents, Moira Shearer.
To know where we are. Gaucher! Go!
I thought once, Mr. Lermontov, that there would be no room in my life for anything but dancing.
You will think so again, my dear.
You're jealous of her.
Yes, I am. But in the way that you will never understand.
Well, Vicky?
Julian, I love you.
But you love that more.
Well, it's great that that trailer still exists. And you and I were kind of wrestling in the last couple of weeks about trying to describe to some of our viewers about the subtleties between like original Technicolor film and this beautiful in its own right restoration, which probably most of our viewers saw, of the Red Shoes, done through digital means, completed about 10 years ago. And we were, I think one of the analogies we came up with was that the look of Technicolor on film, there's a slightly rough and ready or look to it kind of, and this film element has a little bit of wear and tear, but it's in pretty good shape overall. Like original Technicolor film is like maybe sandpaper versus digital restorations velvet or something. There's something a little more tactile to the film, but they're both beautiful in their own right.
I think that's very accurate, Gary, because the Technicolor, and you and I chatted about this a bit during the summer when we discussed the Bandwagon. You think of a 35 millimeter film print of Technicolor like a silk screen, where various colors have been wiped onto the print individually, and that was pretty much the principle of the original Technicolor printing process that created these incredibly rich colors that subsequent less expensive forms of film technology were not able to achieve. Digital, once these things are digitized, some of the roughness of film are removed. Maybe seems a little more synthetic, but the color, of course, is still magnificent.
Well, now my impression is, and perhaps you can elaborate on this. Michael Powell's bio a little bit better than me, but when we see them getting the sort of co-credit, they're written, produced, and directed by Michael Powell and Emma Pressburger. My impression is that Powell was sort of responsible for most of the on-set directing, Pressburger for the screenplay. There was always a little bit of overlap, and I think then also the notion that they were at the helm of this incredible group of craftsmen who worked on these films, from the cinematographer on down, whose career you know very well, as I recall.
That's very accurate about Powell, Gary. He was the director of the films. Pressburger was the chief writer, although Powell did collaborate with him on the screenplays. But Powell felt that anything less than a co-credit, anything less than their sharing credit for everything was just not acceptable. And it's refreshing about Powell because he was very, very generous with his collaborators. He didn't take credit for everything as being his own. He wanted to have some of the best craftspeople in Europe working with him who could challenge him and debate him on matters from music to cinematography to editing to production design. And the results speak for themselves. He remained generous till the very end. Because I noticed with his compatriot Alfred Hitchcock made these films by himself. He almost never acknowledged his collaborators, whereas Powell was very generous in acknowledging his. And it was an amazing creative team, as you've mentioned.
Yes. I mean, The Red Shoes is an unusual example of a British film that flopped in its home country's theatrical release and only became a phenomenon when it came to America, running for 2 years in one New York City theater and winning Oscars for art direction and musical score. And I think the beginnings of a full appreciation of Powell and Pressburger's work didn't really start in America till 1980, when MoMA did an exhaustive retro of their films in which Martin Scorsese and his longtime film editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, played a critical role. And Powell and Pressburger's films, especially The Red Shoes, have been an inspiration to Scorsese from his youth. I think his father took him to see the film when he was, in his preteen years. In that same month as the MoMA show, in November 1980, Scorsese's own Raging Bull was released. And to me, many of the boxing scenes in that film, the Sugar Ray Robinson fight, the Tony Gennaro fight, show the influence of like both physical grace and emotional turmoil, and ultimately the tragedy that we witness in Red Shoes.
The Michael Powell Raging Bull analogy actually makes total sense, because when Raging Bull first came out, I think it was American Film Magazine was doing a story on the production of it, and Scorsese was relating how he had shot some test footage of Robert De Niro in color, going through the boxing ring and going through the matches, and he was screening it with Michael Powell, and Michael Powell was saying, but his gloves are red. And Powell was surprised by that, and that got Scorsese thinking, why are we shooting this in color? Let's shoot it in black and white. So that was a definite, I think the correlation makes perfect sense. They were out of fashion, Powell and Pressburger, you're right, until the 80s. In fact, in the early 80s, it was still difficult to track down uncut versions of their films, because most of the Powell and Pressburger films, with the exception of The Red Shoes, which was pretty much left alone,
Right.
but most of the other films were cut for the US market, titles were changed, sometimes directors refilmed sequences on a couple of occasions. And so it took a while. It took Scorsese and it took Michael Powell's third and final wife, Thelma Schoonmaker, to change that.
Well, there's that legendary scene early in the film, kind of the heart and soul of the movie to me, where the dancer Vicky Page and Boris Lermontov first encounter each other at that after party, and conversation ensues, and there's some embarrassment, and then he asks her bluntly, "Why do you want to dance?" And she says, "Why do you want to live?" And he kind of hesitatingly replies, "Well, I don't know exactly why, but I must." And she says, "That's my answer too." And the film kind of takes off like a rocket, I think, from there, dramatically.
It does, and it's, in a way, it's keeping with some of the dark themes of Powell and Pressburger's work, because I know years later, when he made that very, very controversial thriller Peeping Tom, people were just horrified in England by it 12 years later. But they're conveniently forgetting that Red Shoes is a dark film, and of course it's based on a very, very dark source material from Hans Christian Andersen. And when the film came out, of course, the British press, which is notoriously unsupportive of UK filmmakers, was dismissing the ending with Vicky perishing as typical of the Archers' tastelessness. And Powell was reminding people, well, you know, if I had been more faithful to the Hans Christian Andersen source material, she would have had her legs cut off by a woodcutter, and she would have been hobbling to heaven on stumps. You know, so this is a dark film, not only because she perishes in the end, but you've got this Svengali-like dance master who's controlling her, and is it love or is it just a control thing?
You quoted to me, I think, in our discussion last week, you know, Britain and the world had just come through a period now. It's the mid to late 40s where, as he put it, we had been asked to die for freedom and democracy. Yeah. And now in The Red Shoes, we were being asked to die for art, which some of us are willing to do, obviously.
No, it's true. And he said he wanted the film to represent, quote, the conflict between romance and realism, between theater and life. And yes, here she was sacrificing herself for her art.
It was tremendously influential on certain Hollywood musicals and musical film directors. There's a terrific essay by David Ehrenstein that comes with the DVD, where he reported that Gene Kelly, in preparing An American in Paris, which of course has that fabulous ballet of its own at the end, screened the film 15 times for his cast and crew before they started production. That's
Powell confirmed that in his autobiography, and apparently Kelly had to just keep screening it for the MGM brass to convince them to let him do his 17-minute American in Paris ballet, because this has a 15-minute ballet as well. And you can definitely see how this film influenced the Kelly Manelli picture, from the cinematography alone, with the way that, right until the very end, where in The Red Shoes, when the camera tracks into the Leonid Messine shoemaker holding the red shoes in his hand, which is virtually repeated at the end of the American in Paris ballet, when the camera moves into Kelly holding the red rose. So the influence is absolutely unmistakable. Ironically, Powell claimed he never saw An American in Paris, which I was surprised by that. But.
Well, and then I think the question that for decades has always been kind of raging in most discussions of The Red Shoes I've had with friends and colleagues is that what exactly is the nature of Lermontov's obsession or attraction to Vicky Page, you know, whose career he makes, obviously. Is it sexual? Is it romantic? Is it simply his lust for power and control? And Powell, in some of his comments, maybe in the biography or elsewhere, seems to also want us to think that very clearly Lermontov is a gay man, and so romantic obsession is not really part of the equation. It's more some kind of artistic and spiritual stranglehold that he has to maintain on his artists.
The only hint for me was when Lermontov had booked dinner reservations for the two of them, and that to me was a big step. Oh, he's inviting her to dinner. He's starting to romance her, but then finds out that she's in love with the composer. But Powell definitely liked the sexual ambiguity of some of the performers in this film, and so that symbolism you cite, it makes sense, because he did like the fact that some of the performers were, they're openly gay, or gay performances gay performers that led sort of a sexual ambiguity in their performances.
I suspect when we get to our Q&A, we're going to get many different interpretations of that relationship, which kind of, that triangle, obviously including the Julian Craster character, which lies, I think, at the heart of the film.
And just a little bit about the history, going back a ways. This originated in a screenplay that Emmerich Pressburger wrote 1936-1937 for producer Alexander Korda. It was supposed to be a vehicle for Merrill Oberon, but for whatever reason, things didn't work out. And after Powell and Pressburger were having these run of successes, they were able to negotiate rights for the Pressburger screenplay from Korda so they could make it for J. Arthur Rank. And changes, of course, were made, but the essence of the story was based on this earlier material.
Right. I guess Korda had, at the time, was romantically involved with the actress Merle Oberon and wanted to produce it as a vehicle for her. Their relationship went kaputsky, I guess, at a certain point in the early 40s. And then the Archers, the Powell Pressburger production company, had a series of hits, and they were able to acquire the property apparently inexpensively.
And then after The Red Shoes, ironically, which was the pinnacle of their international acclaim, they left J. Arthur Rank to go make films for Alexander Korda, and Powell considered that to be a career mistake. He actually thought that the Rank empire was a better umbrella for them, and that they made some choices that he was not pleased with, although, of course, their subsequent dance film, The Tales of Hoffman, emerged from that collaboration. But the collaborators on this film are extraordinary, from the composer Brian Eadsdale to the cinematographer Jack Cardiff to, of course, the production designer Hein Heckroth. I mean, they were all major co-conspirators in this ballet film.
Well, I've had a long personal history with the film, going back to the 80s and 90s. When I was working for a film distributor called Kino International. It's now known as Kino Lorber Films, which got its start servicing classics to the many revival cinemas around the U.S. And we had multiple 35 millimeter film prints of The Red Shoes, but no one of them was in optimal condition in terms of either its color or its physical shape. And I was once tasked with trying to, the expression was, cannibalize or edit together the best reels or sections into one acceptable whole to play in revival cinemas. And in doing so, I had to use a 35 millimeter film editing table to view and note the quality of about 24 reels of the film, including the famous Reel 5. Reel 5 is just the dance sequence, the famous The Red Shoes Ballet, which runs about 15 minutes, self-contained on its own reel. And after being surrounded by literally 2 or 3 dozen piles of film reels and making a number of splices and having to remove damaged frames, resulting in some less than seamless transitions, I got this sinking feeling of, artistic sacrilege going on. And after 1 or 2 complaint-generating screenings of this cannibalized print, the company fortunately opted to tap its line of credit and order a brand new print from the UK.
My only connection to The Red Shoes was I once took tap dancing as a teenager in Milwaukee from a British dance choreographer and teacher named Alan Baker, who was in the Red Shoes when he was, I guess, a teenager. And when it was aired on public television, he was trying to find where he was. And I wished I had asked him, did you ever find where you were? But that was the closest connection I had. But the cast of the film, it's worth talking a little bit about some of the actors. Anton Wallbrook, who was from Austria, he was a descendant of 10 generations of circus clowns, and you can't make that up.
Wow.
And then he pursued theater acting. He's going to be making his screen debut in Germany and also in Austria in the 1920s. He's going to start getting starring roles in films in Germany in the early 30s. He's remaining in Germany until around 36, 37. Not sure what that was about, but he's eventually going to be ending up in England, where he will be acting for Powell in 49th Parallel, where he played one of the German expat resistors who are living in Canada, and anti-fascists.
Another good film in a completely different vein.
Completely different vein. And then he will also appear in in Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, their first Technicolor epic in 1943. And then later on, he'll make a couple of other films for them, including he'll also appear most famously in Max Ophuls' Lola Montez.
Well, and as you say, in the mid 30s in Germany, as both a gay and Jewish young man, he was obliged to get out of there at a certain point. And
yeah, it's amazing he was able to hold on for 4 years. It's really quite astonishing. And then the Maura Scherer, it took some convincing for her to get to accept the part in this picture. She was with the Sadler's Wells Ballet, where Robert Helpmann was also choreographing and performing. And she was not that eager. There was that snobbery, that anti-film snobbery that those in the ballet world had. And after the phenomenon of the Red Shoes, she actually rejected offers from like MGM, who wanted to sign her to a contract. And she ended up making a couple of more films with Powell, including Tales of Hoffmann, and then Peeping Tom in a non-dancing role. But mostly it was her stage work that followed.
Well, and again, that's one of my favorite signature scenes in the picture is the kind of that first, I don't know, almost psychic connection or something between Lermontov and Vicky, where he allows her to dance one performance in some little theater off the beaten path there in London. And he slips into the theater unannounced to watch her. And at one point she sees that he's seen her, and there's this, they lock eyes, a series of beautiful electric transitions and close-ups, and the rest, we know the rest.
It's the Little Mercury Theater. Now, I'm not sure if they actually filmed that in the Little Mercury Theater or whether that was recreated, but that was one of the theaters that was popular at the time. And Powell said that's noteworthy as being the only scene in the film where you see an audience observing the dancers.
Right.
We don't see the audience after that. And there was a touch there that only Michael Powell would have thought of. Maybe this was maybe Emmerich Pressburger recommended it, but you would not have seen this in the Hollywood picture. When Maura Scherer is doing her turns on stage at the Mercury, we cut to a point of view that the ballerina's point of view, where you're seeing all this spinning room. We call it spotting, where you have to focus on one particular location as you're turning.
Right.
But who but Michael Powell would have thought to do that? It's just brilliant, brilliant.
Well, we're going to, as Norma has promised, we're going to bring Janice Bogart on here momentarily, who has some personal reminiscences, remarkable ones about the film, starting with a location that's actually used in the movie, Covent Garden, right? Where some early scenes from the picture are filmed.
That is correct, and because we do see some actual location work in Covent Garden, at least the exterior of the theater, and then they did some filming in the theater itself. And that's what I find fascinating about the Red Shoes is there's some elements of realism where you do see some location work, which in Technicolor is always difficult, because they started out filming in the south of France. On location for about, I think, 4 weeks, I think it was. And then they did some filming in England, including Covent Garden, as you pointed out. And what's also important is they shot the film in sequence, which...
Very unusual.
Very unusual and expensive. Because normally in a film, for budgetary reasons, if there are several scenes taking place in this office at the beginning and the end, we film those all at the same time because it's just cheaper than having to get the crew and the actors back.
Yes.
But for Red Shoes, all the scenes we saw were pretty much in the order that they were filmed. The ballet, I believe, being saved for the very end. It helps the actors with continuity in their characters. But so what I was getting at also, you mentioned that, yes, they're filming at Covent Garden, the real location, but then there's this deliberately theatrical aspect. And I'm thinking of some of the scenes where the Anton Wallbrook character is in his office alone at night. It's a very theatrical set. And after Vicky has left with the composer and they're off living together or staying together in this, it was a hotel room or a suite, that looks very theatrical, like a play. And that had to have been a deliberate touch on Powell. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think you're right. And that whole, I guess that's supposed to be his office, or he's holding court there after the premiere of the Red Shoes, and he's taking calls and he's shooing people away and he's calling people in. Yes, it's a very theatrical construct, I think, compared to some of the other locations.
And the color is absolutely breathtaking. I mean, they had, as I said, they had already shot Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. They had shot A Stairway to Heaven, A Matter of Life and Death in color. They made Black Narcissus the year before, which the cinematographer for the Red Shoes, Jack Cardiff, won an Academy Award for. But the colors in this one are just extraordinary. And Cardiff is going to, the year after this, he's going to shoot Capricorn in color for Alfred Hitchcock.
You and I have discussed one of the more controversial films.
Definitely, that's a deal breaker for a lot of people when they see it. But he'll be shooting films for Joseph Mankiewicz in the 1950s. He'll shoot The African Queen for John Huston, War and Peace for King Vidor, and then he will become a director in the 1960s on a number of films. His DP credits kind of start to deteriorate, unfortunately. But The Red Shoes is just the pinnacle of his powers, I think, as a color cinematographer.
Absolutely. Now, I saw we had Janice Bogart up on the screen here a moment or two ago, who has a couple of fascinating tales to tell us about the Red Shoes. Let's see if Janice can come back on here. There she is. Janice, welcome.
And thank you, Janice, by the way. We're so grateful to your wonderful support. Great to see you.
Oh, I'm thrilled. Before I say anything, I want to thank Norma for starting this whole movie situation with New Plaza. It is a joy to work with, and to see the old movies is a thrill, especially for me, and especially for the ballet-maid in me. So, what can I tell you about my life in ballet? Strictly as a ballet-maid, not a dancer. That I didn't do very well in school because I spent most of my time at ballet rehearsals. I found a secret way, secret to me anyway, in Covent Garden. And as you know, Covent Garden really was a fruit market, fruit and vegetables. And you have to go through the fruit and vegetable market and all the wonderful people, just like Stanley Holloway, to get into Covent Garden. It was suddenly from the sublime to the ridiculous, or the other way around, shall I say, because Covent Garden was so elegant and very beautiful. However, I found this secret way, and I snuck my way up into the third tier, where I would lie on the floor, under the stairs, under the seats, I should say, and watch the rehearsals. And at one time, John Cranko, that great choreographer, suddenly shouted out, "My God, there's someone in the hall and in the house." And I thought, my God, they're going to kill me. They're going to cut off my feet. And they looked and they searched, but they never found me because I'm very small. So indeed, I escaped and was there to come back another day. Ultimately, I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of the wonderful stars, Robert Helpman, and of course, the superb dancer who played the shoemaker. Was blocking on his name.
Leonid Massine, I believe, right?
Yes. Leonid
Massine. Leonid Massine, yes. Wonderful, wonderful dancer. And with a kind of a circus-like body, he could tie himself up in knots and
Well-
perform almost anything on air.
So Janice, this
to me,
would be
it was
the
a
equivalent
joy.
of someone sneaking into Carnegie Hall or something today, right? That which you probably,
Absolutely. Then, of course, they could never get in nowadays, but I did. But indeed, it was, I expect it was against the law. It certainly was against ballet rules, but I didn't care about that. The ballet was so important. To me, it was, I couldn't dance. I mean, I was not a dancer. But to live with these people was very, very special.
I know from
and
our
here we are to see them.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To see them in the film, young and strong and performing the way they did in those days was an absolute.
I know from our conversation, you recall, still recall seeing the Red Shoes in its original release in a theater somewhere in England.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It must have been in London. And oh, the absolute thrill. It's a little bit different now. Filmmaking has changed, but I think it's a magnificently made film. It still holds up, and one can get swept away in the drama and the sadness and the pain of dance. And actually, it was thrilling to see it again, and to see everybody young again. Anton Wallbrook, he was so handsome. And the dancers were just thrilling. I always followed her. She was a premier dancer, and she was magnificent.
And I know you have your own perspective on the nature of the relationship between Maura Scheer and Anton Wallbrook as well, which is even a slightly different one than I think I've ever heard before.
Oh yes, it has been said that they thought, I'm sorry, I forgot that one, that he was in love with her. But I don't believe he was in love with her. He wanted to own her. He wanted to be in possession of this extraordinary talent. It was as though he wanted her to be the girl in a gilded cage, that he needed to own that kind of passionate dancing. And indeed, she was a wonderful dancer.
Well, I think that's beautifully put. And
Absolutely.
This is the kind of stuff that we really live for here on this program. So we want to thank you very much for taking the time and then recounting these scenes and these feelings, which have obviously endured for over 70 years now.
Indeed, indeed. I'm so glad that I did that. I'm so glad that I missed school.
And the fact that you actually met Leonid Messine is fantastic because he, even though Robert Helpmann was credited as being the chief choreographer for the Red Shoes, Messine choreographed his specific shoemaker.
His dance. Yeah, and I believe he always did that. He had his own way of doing things, but he was a magnificent choreographer and an extraordinary dancer. And having seen him in many things.
That's fantastic. He was born in Moscow. He died in Germany. He had choreographed more than 50 ballets, and he was, Diaghilev had seen him as a chance to replace Nijinsky. And he was very important, and he was very much a believer in narrative and characterization in ballet. Not that that didn't exist before, but he certainly took it to a new level, as we, of course, see in this film.
Yes, very much so. That he was always the character that he portrayed. He was very much involved in that person, that weird person as a rule that he danced. You really felt him there.
Well, Jenny, thank you very much. And Max, you've been working on a special, cutting a special trailer here for our next presentation. So I think that's where we're going to go right now. Sure,
but of course we're going to be opening up the floor to questions and comments from our wonderful guests. But yes, before we do, we'll tempt you with a program that's coming up this Wednesday as part of New Plaza's Cinema Lecture Series. I'm going to be giving a talk, and this anticipates Gary and my next discussion, which I know Sean will tell us more about. My talk this Wednesday at 3:00 Eastern Time is on the films of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. They were together for 50 years. They made quite a number of films together, several of which he directed her in. I'll be talking about that, taking us through a little tour of their life and their career. And just to whet your appetites, here is our trailer for this talk that's coming up on Wednesday.
A good time for everybody to hit their participant button to get ready for the Q&A.
There you go. And with that, that's going to be Wednesday. And with that, I will turn the proceedings off over to Saul, who will help us with the Q&A. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Max. So as we usually do at this time, we ask our audience to please raise their hand. And again, also, please wait until you're called on to turn your audio or video on. And the way you raise your hand is you hover over the participant button, and then the blue hand will show up, and then you go ahead and click that. And we've got 5 people with their hands raised, so we'll start with Barry. So Barry, if you would please start your video. And again, I ask everybody, Barry, one moment. I ask everybody, please do not start your video unless you're called on. Thank you very much. Barry, please.
Hi, Max. Hi, Gary.
Hey, Barry.
I saw a version of this film on the Criterion channel, and the color was spectacular. The edition they had is exactly as you said, just breathtakingly beautiful. I don't know how I ever missed seeing this movie. I thought I had seen it, and then I thought, and I said, no, I saw the red balloon. I didn't see the red shoes. But I have 2 questions. The first one has to do with how it was received in the U.S. This was a remarkably modern film for 1948. One of the shots that stood out for me was the one Max just referenced, the Vicky's point of view as she was dancing was just brilliant. But the truck shot towards the red shoes, the cobbler's scene, the scenes in the cobbler's shop, the fantasy scenes during the dance, the dissolves with Craster on stage. There's so much inventiveness that I don't think existed before this time or to this extent. How was the film received by the US critics, and how did it do in the US? I know it didn't do well in the UK. Did the UK critics slam it? Is that why it didn't do well there?
Great questions. According to Powell, they had opened the film in London at one of the Odeon houses, but only had it on the screen there for 10 days, and then they rushed it into general release because they wanted to make as much money as they could. And just when people were hearing about it, it lost the momentum in England. So that's what happened in the UK. Everywhere else it played, especially the United States, it was tremendously successful. Gary may have some more data on
it. It apparently ran for 2 years in one theater in Midtown Manhattan, released by Universal, oddly, in the United States. But yeah, a rare example of a British film that flopped at home, but kind of made its bones here in the United States and became a huge hit, and I think internationally as well.
Were the U.S. critics kinder to it?
I hadn't have read a lot of the reviews here in the States, but I don't remember it getting particularly bad reviews. I think they were very enthusiastic about it.
Mhm.
And the fact that it got several Academy Award, it got quite a number of Academy Award nominations. And Universal had already had a release of Black Narcissus the previous year, so there was that relationship with the Rank organization. But here, people appreciated it, and you're absolutely right about some of the modern things that the film was doing that other filmmakers were not doing in Hollywood. That's visible in so much of Powell and Pressburger's collaborations.
Kind of a high watermark for British films in America at that point. The Oscar for Best Picture that year went to Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. Now, of course, in hindsight, we think the quote-unquote shoe should be on the other foot as far as who should have won, what picture should have won that year for Best Film, because Hamlet is a respectable effort, but it's hardly exciting cinema, at least in my recollection.
But politics always raises its ugly head in these situations, because the U.S. film industry was very angry about these British films getting this Academy Award attention, and there was a bit of a trade war heating up between the UK film businesses and Hollywood. Hollywood wanted more control over the British market, and Powell wanted the two industries to work together, but he was facing a more mercenary U.S. industry. But anyway, despite the Academy Award attention Red Shoes got, there was still some discomfort that a British film was getting Academy Award attention.
One quick question. And the cobbler scene, when Vicky returns to dance and comes back to do the red shoes, the cobbler is working on her shoes and they're red. And when, they're not red, I'm sorry, they're gold. And then when they appear on her feet, they're red. But as he's leaving the cobbler shop and the shoes are in his hands, they're gold.
Actually, when he,
no.
as I understand it, when he sets them down, they are red, and she walks up to the shoes and jumps into them magically. I believe they're already red when he sets them down.
This is the later scene where she comes back to dance later.
Not the 15-minute ballet scene.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
Sorry. Thank you. That's a good point. And listen, there was some disagreement about that because Pressburger wasn't thrilled about the Maura Shearer character having her red shoes on at the very end. And Powell said, she's got to have the shoes on. And they went at it for a while and came up with this solution that you're talking about.
So they just don't explain the fact that he's leaving the shop with a gold pair of shoes and then miraculously they're red when they're on her feet.
That's a continuity thing.
We've got to go back and look at that again. That's a very curious point, if that's correct.
Great. Thank you, Barry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barry.
See me at another.
Oops, sorry about that. A little fast on the trigger. Again, I want to remind everybody that if you want to ask a question, please hit the participate button and raise your hand. I also want to mention that the chat function is disabled. I'm the only person seeing your chat. There are a couple of good questions. I'll read them, but again, if the people asking questions would raise their hand and be part of the presentation, that'd be excellent. So I'm going to ask Wayne to
yes,
mute. And Wayne, give me 1 second, and please start your video.
Okay.
Does
that work?
Yep,
Does that work?
Wayne, hello.
Yep, you're all good.
Okay.
Wayne.
Oh, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. This film has been a favorite of mine for a long time. I had a comment about the storyline, and I very much appreciated the insight that Lermontov wasn't so much in love with Vicky as wanting to own her talent. But it's always been my impression that Powell intended for Lermontov to be the villain or the inspiration for her suicide. And I kind of viewed it differently. I viewed it as Goring being the villain here because he made her choose between dance and being married to him.
He doesn't come off, his character does not come off very well at the end. You're absolutely right.
Right.
And we can actually almost attribute her death to his demands. I think that's a very fair analogy.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Thank you, Wayne.
That's
Thank
a great
you
powerful.
Okay. We had one of the questions for you, Max, was what did the film cost? And while you're talking about that real quickly, I'm going to get Joan to get started. Do you have that information? If you,
You know, I do, because a very enterprising person had asked me that the other day. I know it was around £500,000, and I can actually get specifics for you, because I know someone did ask me about that. I will have to. Let's see here, because I know I responded to. Give me a minute or two. I'm going to come back to that point.
Yep, I got it. Okay, and excellent. Okay, Joan, please go ahead.
Thank you. I had a couple, as usual, it was a great discussion. First, Gary, I disagree with you about one thing. Hamlet in 1948 was the first time I'd ever seen Hamlet produced or acted, and I never forgot it. I always thought, from that time, it's always been my favorite. Well, I know I've seen better ones. I've always loved it. I thought it was great. So if I had to decide between them, I can understand why Hamlet won in a way. I never realized they were out the same year. Then I have to say, watching The Red Shoes, I agree that Julian Craster comes off less well than one would like to think, because he never seems to occur to him what he's asking Vicky to give up. He just seems very macho in an old-fashioned way. And Lermontov, no matter how often I've seen the film, and I've seen it dozens of times,
wow,
I can't help thinking that he was, in some twisted way, also in love with her. The scene where he smashes his hand into the mirror, and certain times when he's watching her, I'm not convinced it's entirely artistic that he wants to own her. He does want to own her, but I think, to me, there's always been a sexual undertone to his passion, and she is extraordinarily beautiful. She's just amazing. And lastly, I'd like to ask both of you, what is it that makes this film and so many of their others, the Technicolor, so completely unique, rich, and gorgeous, like you've never seen anywhere else? And I'm not sure what that is attributed to.
Sure. Well, the Technicolor, because it was using the cameras. Thank you so much, Joan, for that.
Yeah,
the cameras were using 3 times as much film stock, each representing a major color: yellow cyan.
Wasn't that true for other Technicolor filmmakers?
Yes, but I think, quite frankly, Powell and Pressburger were able to experiment more in ways that Hollywood directors weren't. They had to deal with Technicolor and Natalie Kalmus coming in and being the Technicolor advisor, but ultimately they had their way in how certain colors were going to be applied in a way that I think maybe other directors working for Hollywood studios couldn't. That's Gary may want to add to that.
Well, I think we're also lucky, Joan, that the film has been as exquisitely well preserved as it has been now, and that the elements have survived, and we have this new restoration, which is about a decade old now, which to me somehow puts it on another level of beauty in terms of the use of where every shot, every piece of clothing, every ball of light seems to be so meticulously planned and designed.
But
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate it.
I finally do have an answer for the previous question. The Red Shoes, it cost £500,000 British pounds in 1948. That's about 18.2 million pounds today. It went over budget by 200,000 pounds back then, which was a massive amount of money. What 18.2 million British pounds today, what that equals in US dollars, I'm not sure what the dollar to pound conversion is.
30 something million dollars probably would be my guess. So
Yeah.
Probably the most expensive British film of that year, for sure.
A very expensive production.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Jane, can you start your video?
How about if I just unmute? I just have a very simple for the end. I just didn't know when you would end. To give us, particularly those of us who weren't on your overview of films, some of your favorites, so that if we wanted to see others, what were some of your favorite that you overviewed?
From Powell and Pressburger?
Yes, you had that overview of
Sure.
films, but I don't know what they, if you want to save that for the
Yeah.
end.
Or Gary, go ahead.
Well, I think Max and I are probably in agreement. These are all films you should seek out if you're a lover of the Red Shoes. 49th Parallel, which we mentioned, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, I Know Where I'm Going, A Matter of Life and Death, also known as Stairway to Heaven in some quarters, Black Narcissus, Rapturous Technicolor, a lesser known film called The Small Black Room in exquisite black and white, which they made right after the Red Shoes. That's a good start.
Yeah, and Tales of Hoffman, which is a mixed affair, has some spectacular dance sequences as well. The Powell, you're going to find something fascinating no matter what they offer. And I know Criterion offers their films on DVD and also for streaming.
And of course, Peeping Tom.
Save that for the end. You got to work your way.
Chronological order.
Yeah, I wouldn't jump into that right away.
All right, Marjorie, would you please start your video? We have 4 more questions after Marjorie. Marjorie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Got it.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, I just have a comment and a few questions. I really compared Anton Wallbrook's character to that of Clifton Webb's in Laura. That, the complete control and that this person doesn't belong to anybody else but him. And that's what that character really did remind me of. And all of the other, the sexual, the love and all, I think is meant to be ambiguous. And it does really succeed. But the expressions on his face, without any words, you just wonder what he's thinking and what he's after. He's really a terrific actor. But I did have a question. I love the movie, the effects, all as you said. I do have a problem with the story. To my way of thinking, it wasn't clear that she committed suicide or whether those shoes were just dancing uncontrollably to her death. And that was very ambiguous. But what did she do that was so terrible, either way, that she deserved to die? She just picked her career over her husband, which people do that even today. Sometimes they have to make a thing. So I thought that ending was problematic.
Well, the ending it's a hard-hitting ending. He was clearly a Powell and Pressburger. They were trying to capture the Hans Christian Andersen ending because the girl dies, the woman dies dancing in the Red Shoes. So they felt any other ending would not have been appropriate for this narrative.
Yeah, that I understand, but there was ambiguity.
About the feelings that he might have.
Whether it was
You're absolutely right, Mark. In fact,
or the shoes just carried her away. That was thing. And also about her Marius Goring's character right at the beginning when his professor plagiarizes his music. Yeah. And he lets him get away with it. Was he bought off with this assistant conductorship?
Well, there's a great
kosher to me, just not kosher.
There's a great line. Lermontov has the line to Julian. He says, "It's much more disheartening to have to steal than to be stolen from." Yeah. It's such a great line.
Right.
And here's something. I don't know if anybody picked up on this. The irony for me was Julian's score. It was actually steals the first 4 bars of Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
So that was my observation.
Yeah. Okay, those are my questions.
Great questions. Great.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Daniel, can you start your video? And Daniel, would you please try unmuting? There you go. Thank you.
Hello again. I have a couple of slightly disparaging comments about Monsieur Powell and Pressburger's writing style. And I want to refer first to Colonel Blimp, which in preparation for this, I watched several of their films. And much as I liked Colonel Blimp, there was a really peculiar business with the duel early in the film. We spend about 10, 15 minutes learning the reasons for the duel. And then once we get to the set where the duel happens, there's another 10 minutes as they're shuffling around and planning the starting cue and assigning the sabers to each other. And then once the duel begins, the camera booms up suddenly through the roof to show us that it's snowing outside. We never ever see the duel itself. And then we cut to a nursing home where both of the wounded combatants are staying, and a nurse comes in and tells us what happened. Now, having been a student of screenwriting as well as a practitioner thereof, it's as if in Screenwriting 101, they were playing hooky on the day that they said, show it, don't tell it. And
I'm laughing because I went through the same emotions when I watched Colonel Blimp recently too. I don't want to get us too off of the red shoes,
indeed.
But by Powell's own admission was, he said there are other directors who are much better storytellers than I, and I think there's a lot of narrative weirdness in a lot of their films. And
yeah. Well, carrying it forward to the red shoes, there is the mysterious exit from the scene at the party where Vicky and Lermontov are together, and he says, well, come with me, I want to talk to you. And we never see that scene.
It fades to black. I noticed the same thing. I said, wait a minute, what are they going to talk about? I noticed that too.
Part of me was thinking that it was intentionally left ambiguous to maybe suggest that he seduced her. But who knows? I'm not against ambiguity, but I just find this strange and sometimes uncinematic.
Well, strange is a very powerful word, and I think it applies to a lot of the Powell-Pressburger films.
Yeah.
There's a strange element running through them. For me, maybe because I love melodrama, I was disappointed a little bit in the prima ballerina, Ludmila Tchernina's character. I would have liked a little more conflict between her and Vicky, but that was just I thought she could have been more of an obstacle, but those are great points.
Okay. See you later.
Thanks, Daniel.
Daniel, thank you so much.
Thanks, Daniel.
And we have 3 more questions, one from Nancy, one from Jean, and one from Rhonda. So we're going to go to Nancy first. So Nancy, please start your video.
There. Can you hear me right? Hi.
Hi.
Some of my questions were already answered, and that's great. And thank you again. Both of you are amazing. My question to you is this. Vicky was lovely, fantastic, fluid, graceful, but to compare her ballet skills to what exists in today's world, where there's much more athleticism, I don't think it would hold up. Her extensions were not as spectacular. Everything she did was gorgeous. I don't want to diminish what she did, but compared to what the ballerinas of today are doing, it's a different world.
I think that's fair because I was kind of studying her as she was doing the pirouettes I see some of your points. I think it has gotten very very competitive in the athleticism in dance. I think that's a fair observation.
Max, did your tap dancing experience lend some?
Well, it's funny because Alan Baker, the one who appeared in the Red Shoes, he urged me to take a couple of semesters of ballet, and I did because it was very useful for tap. Believe it or not, we use a lot of ballet technique in tap. Nancy may have a question. Is that?
No, that's it.
Okay, but thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you both so very much.
Okay. Jean, would you please start your video? And unmute, please. Hi.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know we can't compare the two because it seems like the Red Shoes is classic and, full of all of these artists coming together and coming up with this, and it's based on Hans Christian Andersen and all that. But I was just kind of thinking, and I don't mean to insult anybody here, the more recent film, La La Land, remember that? Was
I thought you were going to say Black Swan, but go ahead.
no, but that was a real dancey film and lots of fluid camera work, and there didn't seem to be edits and this and that. Do you think something like that might have been inspired by it, or these folks didn't have any history of any of that? Don't even compare the two.
I think that Gary may have some thoughts. La La Land, I know they were inspired by some of the Jacques Demy musicals like Young Girls of Rochefort, but clearly Demy would have been inspired by Red Shoes. And you're right, there is more fluid camera work there so you can see the dancing, even when it's not up to par sometimes. But no, that's a fair observation.
I think that certainly the director and writer of La La Land were familiar with the Red Shoes, had seen it. Whether they were trying to emulate it in any way, I'm not so sure.
Right.
I like the film; it's okay. But
right, and that had a more
in a different
contemporary
universe
twist, and these people weren't real dancers per se. So, but somehow it just popped into my head. So I throw that out.
Good observation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. So before I get to Rhonda and Joshua, I actually want to ask, we have a little chat coming into me, and I was wondering, and they're both talking about Lemonov at the end. So one person thinks that he may have softened up at the end, and another person's asking, and that would be Jenny, and then Robin wants to know if he looks like he had a heart attack at the end. What do you guys think?
The only, Gary can probably address that specifically. The only thing I want to add is Powell gave Anton Wallbrook the directions when Lermontov, after Vicky's dead, and he does his curtain speech. He wanted Wallbrook to play it, to perform it as if he was a marionette, because it's a very hypertensive, hyperactive performance, and even the crew that were wondering, is that too much? But that's what Powell wanted. Gary, maybe you can add to that.
All I would say is I think Anton Wallbrook opens and closes his eyes repeatedly and with such effusive emotional éclat, or something we would say in French, than any other actor I can think of, to great impact. But maybe it's a little over the top at that point in that climactic scene. It's never worked for me in the way that it does earlier in the film, and quite as effectively.
Great. Thank you. That was interesting questions from two of our people. Rhonda, would you start your video and unmute yourself? There you go. You're good. No, you just muted yourself. Unmute yourself, please.
It's not happening.
We hear you.
You're good.
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Just a comment and another question about the story. The comment is, I noticed in the beginning of the trailer, they said this was Maura's this was her debutante performance, so it was her first film. So she was playing herself in there. I mean, because it was Vicky's first thing too. And so I'm wondering, given that she didn't like the idea of film, if this was a possible reason why she took it. It was really her own story.
That wasn't even addressed in Michael Paulo's memoir, but I think that's as fair as an analogy as one could make, I think.
And to take it a little bit further, I was wondering what was left out of the Hans Christian Andersen story, because psychologically, it was a surprise. I mean, if this was an opera, maybe it wouldn't surprise me as much, but she was pretty stable. And to have to make a decision in 2 minutes with this guy that she loved and dance and all of that, was there something left out of the story that would give it some more weight?
That's always a hard one to, unless we have access to the original screenplay, whether there was more material film there. But certainly the ballet there's a lot of mental stress that places on the dancers. So you were getting a sense that she conceivably was deteriorating once she returned to perform for Lermontov. But maybe that was maybe you felt that was too compressed to be convincing.
Yeah, she just, I mean, I could see her getting angry. I could see her walking out. I could see her doing all kinds of things. But actual suicide at that time for someone who was as together as she was just hard for me.
They were going for that operatic finish.
All right. Thanks, Rhonda. Really interesting. We've had some great questions. We have 3 more questions. We're going to end it with 3 more questions, okay? So we're going to go to Joshua, and after Joshua, we're going to go to Patricia and then Claudine. Okay, so Josh, go right ahead, please.
I wanted to thank you guys so much. I'm 80 years old, and when I was a kid, I had a very determined mother who would take me by the ear to see Sadler Wells whenever they were in New York. And she was determined to shove some culture down my throat. I was as stubborn as she was and resisted it all. I was attracted to Agnes de Mille with the movie versions of Rodgers and Hammerstein plays. And what finally, Gene Kelly, of course, and Fred Astaire, what to me was the ultimate dance movie was Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And that really grabbed me. Then I saw this movie, The Red Shoes, which I had walked out on when I was a kid. And I guess with gray hair comes an entirely different new appreciation. I was totally grabbed by it. It was like I fell into cultural quicksand. I could not leave and get my eyes off of that film from beginning to end. I thought it was absolutely fabulous. And again, if it wasn't for you guys, I'd have passed it up. Thank you again.
Thank you, Joshua. That means a lot to us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We love that.
Very nice.
That's great.
And we're going to go to Patricia, and after Patricia, Claudine. So Patricia, would you please start your video and unmute yourself? Excellent. Oh, you just shut yourself off. And please try unmute. Good, you should be good to go.
Okay. My question is, to what extent was there the influence of the knowledge of ballet of the American public in regard to this ballet or to this film?
Well, it's a good question. Powell's, in his memoirs, and I'm not quoting verbatim here, but someone disparagingly said, well, this is only going to appeal to people who are interested in ballet. And he said, yeah, like every girl in America. So right. He knew there was an audience for this. And I mean, ballet, you know, there was certainly, ballet was a big deal for classes, for children, girls especially, to take. And the film capitalized on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And the last question is going to go to Claudine. So Claudine, would you please start your video and unmute yourself?
Last but not least.
Hi, Claudine.
All right. As always, just kudos to Gary and Max for insightful, marvelous comments. And also, I thought that Janice really gave that extra sparkle to today's wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Yes, indeed.
And Gary,
Absolutely.
actually, he did actually ask the question that I wanted to ask about how commercially successful The Red Shoes was. But I was thinking, England has always, to me, been the bearer of drama, theater, stage, Shakespeare. That's the gift that I think of that England has given to civilization. But the films have been fabulous. So many marvelous English films. So my question is, have the English films in general
been as successful as the French and the Italian generally for either the English audience or the general worldwide audience?
Depends on the era. I mean, Gary may have some thoughts, but it depends. For example, the problem with, unlike the French industry, the British film industry, it's been a roller coaster economically. It was going gangbusters during World War II, then there were problems, and then in the 60s, the studios invested in England. Then it collapsed in the 70s, and then when the American majors were interested again in the 90s, there was a resurgence. The film industry became something of a Hollywood colony, unfortunately, because the UK government was not always financially supporting the industry in a way that they did in the French government supported the French film business. Gary may have some more thoughts on.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the British film industry's had more ups and downs than say the French has, which to my mind has had a more or less consistent flow of, like, you know, for want of a better word, product, you know, flowing to America and around the world, where British had their heyday in the late 50s, the early 60s. They were kind of down in the 70s. They came back a little bit in the 80s with films like Chariots of Fire and Gandhi, but it's really, and then of course there's the ongoing sniping back and forth between you know, countries like France, which have always looked down on the British cinema a little bit. There was a documentary about 20 years ago produced and narrated by the excellent British director Stephen Frears, where he noted that Truffaut at one point had written in one of his early critical books that the terms British and cinema were incompatible terms to be said in the same sentence. And so Frears simply says, well, bollocks to Truffaut.
Thank you.
Can't top that. That's great.
Thank you, Claudine.
Thanks, Claudine.
And great, guys. Again, marvelous. We're going to get Sean to join us. And thank you both very much.
Thank you, Saul. Thank you, Gary.
Well, yes. Grace under pressure today.
Okay, this is great. Thanks again, guys. Wonderful. I'm just going to quickly, for those of you who are still on, let you know what's coming up next. Max did mention this Wednesday, he's doing the lecture series on Newman and Woodward, which is going to be fabulous. And you saw that trailer that he put together, and I'm sure that got everybody really interested because it's just so exciting to see. But next Sunday, Paris Blues is the movie that we'll be discussing. And I think one of the things that, first of all, it's a great movie, a pairing of Newman and Woodward that's really phenomenal. But in addition to that, we have a couple of great guests. And our guests include Melissa Newman, Paul and Joanne's daughter, charming individual, an artist in her own right, and I think you'll find her fascinating and you'll love seeing her. As well as we have a guest, Wayne Winborn, who's the executive director of jazz studies at Rutgers University, the Institute of Jazz library there, which is the largest archive of jazz material in the world. And he's going to bring to us the perspective of what was going on with jazz in that movie and the jazz players. So I think between Melissa's perspective of her family during that time frame and Wayne's additional perspective of jazz, I think you guys are really going to love this. So I hope you'll join us also next Sunday. It's the first time we've done a talkback that's not free. It's donation based. You can give a donation as little as $1, as much as you want. But it is a way for us to do kind of an end of the year fundraiser without being in person with people. And with these special guests, we think you'll find it very much worth it. So thanks everyone. And we hope to see you on Wednesday and Sunday next week. Thanks for coming.